From the outside, it was just another house on Gwen Hill Road in Charlotte. But what was happening inside was a living nightmare for a 6-year-old girl when first responders arrived on the morning of December 16th, 2025. They walked into a scene of unbelievable cruelty and filth. What they found would launch a homicide investigation and expose the tragic failures of the very systems meant to protect a child named Dominique Moody. I have to warn you, the details of this case are deeply disturbing. It was just before 7:40 in the morning when emergency services got a call for medical assistance at a home in East Charlotte. When police and paramedics arrived at Gwen Hill Road, the scene was already chaotic. Neighbors watched as police cars swarmed the quiet street. Inside the home, first responders found 6-year-old Dominique Moody. She was unresponsive and she wasn't breathing. Paramedics rushed her to a local hospital, but it was too late. Dominique was pronounced dead, but this was just the beginning. A homicide detective began to process the scene. A true scale of the horror started to come into focus. One neighbor later remembers the moment they saw authorities at the house, saying, "I saw they were carrying out a little girl. I didn't know what was going on. I thought she was sick or something." Dominique wasn't just sick. She was the victim of what prosecutors would later call over a year of sustained abuse and neglect. Before her name was in the headlines, Dominique Moody was just a little girl. Her birth mother, Kia McKnight, remembers her as a beautiful, smart baby. Her grandmother, Mika Moody, says she was always, always, always happy. Always smiling, she said. Dominique was small, but she knew her family and she knew she was loved. But tragically, Dominique's life was unstable from very early on. A few years before she died, her mother fell on hard times and was struggling with addiction. Believing she was doing what was best for her daughter, she placed Dominique in the care of a relative she thought she could trust, her maternal aunt, Tanya McKnight. In September of 2021, a court made it official, giving Tanya sole legal and physical custody. The family thought she would be safe. Her grandmother Mika would later say she trusted her. She trusted the wrong person. The vibrant, smiling little girl in the family photos slowly disappeared inside that house. When she died, Dominique Moody weighed only 27 pounds. A healthy 6-year-old girl should weigh around 45 pounds. Her tiny body told a story of starvation and incredible suffering. A horrifying contrast to the happy child her family remembered. Law enforcement and reporters have called the home where Dominique spent her final years a house of horrors. As soon as police walked in, they were hit with the overwhelming smell of feces and urine. The house was an absolute mess, cluttered with trash and crawling with rats and cockroaches. Human and animal waste was in every single room. There was no central heat to keep the children warm. One prosecutor fighting back tears in court described a scene of a complete of filth and decay. This was the setting for the unimaginable cruelty Dominique faced. Court records paint a sickening picture. The investigation found that Dominique was forced to live in a dog crate in the living room, often bound with duct tape. The other children in the home told detectives that it was her legal guardian, Tanya McKnight, who locked her in there. Another adult in the house, Taryn McKnight, eventually admitted to detectives that when Dominique wouldn't listen or stole food, she'd be taped down or restrained. The injuries on Dominique's body were proof of the tortures she went through. A medical examiner found injuries all over her in different stages of healing, which pointed to abuse that had been going on for a very long time. She had burn scars, old marks around her ankles from being tied up, broken ribs. She was also suffering from a severe rash and open sores from being left in soiled diapers for long periods. Police allege her abusers would even force her to watch them eat while they starved her. The cruelty didn't stop. Even in her final moments, when she was found not breathing, they didn't call 911. Instead, the adults in the home alleged put her in front of a stove, trying to warm her up and revive her themselves. Prosecutors found text messages that the adults sent after she had already died. They weren't talking about getting help. They were talking about how to clean the house to hide what they'd done. The texts even include photos of Dominique duct taped, and wrapped in plastic after her death, in a final chilling attempt to cover up their crime. As the investigation went on, 3 women who lived in the house were identified as suspects. 51-year-old Tanya McKnight, Dominique's aunt and legal guardian. 61-year-old Susan Robertson, another adult resident. And 22-year-old Taryn McKnight, described as Dominique's adopted sister. Susan Robinson was arrested first on December 20th of 2025. She was charged with intentional child abuse and 4 counts of misdemeanor child abuse. In court, prosecutors laid out the horrific details and she was denied bond. They argued that she just stood by and did nothing, while Dominique faded away. She allegedly knew the little girl was being taped up, restrained, and starved, but she didn't help, didn't call 911, and didn't report the abuse. In a truly baffling claim, Robinson tried to blame Dominique's birth mother, saying she was the one who abused the girl. Next, Tanya McKnight, the legal guardian, was arrested on the same charges as the person the court had trusted with sole legal and physical custody. Her role was at the center of the investigation. Her bond was eventually set at $2 million. The final arrest came on December 24th, when 22-year-old Taryn McKnight was taken into custody, also facing felony and misdemeanor child abuse charges. She was held without bond. In January of 2026, a grand jury indicted all 3 women. Prosecutors have said they are waiting on lab results and are considering upgrading the charges to murder by torture, an extremely serious charge that reflects just how horrific the abuse was. The question that hangs over this entire case is, how could this happen? How could a child suffer so much for so long and nobody stepped in? Dominique's death has put a harsh spotlight on the system that are supposed to protect children. Records show that between 2022 and Dominique's death in late 2025, police had been called to that house 5 separate times, including for a reported assault. Yet somehow the escalating horror inside the home went unnoticed. The custody arrangement itself raises serious questions. Dominique was placed with her aunt in what's known as kinship care after social services first put her there in 2020. In 2021, a court granted Tanya permanent custody, but court records from that time don't mention anything about the condition of the home. It suggests a major lack of oversight before a child was placed in a new environment. Dominique's grandmother and great-grandmother are certain the system failed her. They told reporters they had tried to get custody of Dominique themselves, but felt that the authorities just ignored their concerns. The North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services released a statement saying they were heartbroken, but cited confidentiality laws as the reason they couldn't comment on any past involvement. That lack of transparency leaves a grieving family and a shocked community with so many unanswered questions about whether more could have and should have been done. The year of documented abuse, the physical evidence, and the multiple police visits all point to a string of missed chances to save her life. The tragic death of Dominique Moody is a story that should shake every single one of us. The details are horrifying, but her story has to be told. The investigation is still ongoing, and authorities have asked anyone with information to contact Crime Stoppers at 704-432-8477. What are y'all's thoughts on this case? What about the potential systematic failure that allowed this to happen? Please share your perspective respectfully in the comments. This case is a devastating reminder that the most monstrous acts can happen right behind the closed doors of an ordinary house on an ordinary street. It forces us to ask hard questions about the systems designed to protect our children and what happens when they fail. For Dominique Moody, a little girl her family remembers as happy and full of life, that failure was absolute. The only justice left for her is to hold those responsible accountable for creating her private hell, and for us as a community to demand changes so that no other child ever has to suffer the same fate.